All right. Hello, Choice Residential. Today we are going over the exclusive buyer agency agreement, and this is the January 2025 revision of the buyer agency agreement. You'll know if you're looking at the correct form by looking at the bottom right corner, and you'll see the date here, revised 1/2025. That is the version you need to be using until there is a more updated and more recent revision. So there are some changes to this version that are going to be very important to you. So I want to touch on these items. First of all, hopefully you know the revision we saw back in October consolidated the buyer agency agreement. It is now only 3 pages, so it has been reduced significantly with a lot of the data and paragraphs consolidated. I'm not going to touch on everything, but some of the changes and important items you need to know as a Choice Residential agent. So first we have these buyer disclosures and the term of the agreement. All of this is the same as what we've had in the past. Fee for services, again, pretty much the same here. Just keep in mind you need to put a specific amount. So we cannot put ranges in the buyer agency agreement. It needs to be a specific dollar amount or a specific percentage. And if there is a non-refundable retainer fee, that is included in what you're charging here. Now, you can have specific commission amounts relating to different types of properties that a buyer may be purchasing. Just make sure that you are listing those up here. So if you may be helping with new construction or land or whatever it may be, residential resales, then list those, particularly if you're going to have different compensation. So you might have X percent for new construction, Y percent for resale, and Z percent for raw land, vacant land. You can do that here. Just make sure you're not entering anything that is open-ended, no range, no wording like up to or between. You can't put anything like whatever the seller or builder offers, none of that. You need to put a specific amount. I'm going to touch on this fee earned and due and payable section because this can be confusing when an agent is unprepared to explain it to a client. That is that the fee that we charge up here in paragraph 4 is earned when the buyer goes under contract to purchase real property. Now it's earned, but it's not due and payable unless the buyer closes on a property or defaults on the contract to purchase the property. So yes, that means if a buyer terminates the contract after the due diligence period has ended, that means they are in default of that contract. They've breached that contract. And even though the only remedies to the seller in most cases is keeping the due diligence fee and earnest money, it doesn't change the fact that the buyer did in fact breach the contract. So the other implication is that technically the commission up here is payable. So they would owe the firm the commission if they were to breach the purchase contract. And of course, if they close, they owe the commission as well. Seller or listing firm assistance. This just again explains to the buyer that we are likely going to seek compensation from the seller or listing firm, but they are not obligated to pay us. So it is the buyer's obligation to pay us if we can't retrieve the commission from the other side. Mutual termination. This was added and meant to be or worded like this to be very clear to a buyer that they can't just sign this agreement and then go sign an agency agreement with another agent. Well, technically they can do that, but they're going to still be on the hook for any fees that are earned and that become due and payable to us. So unless we mutually agree to terminate this agreement. So it just drives home the point that this is a bilateral agreement. We are 2 parties here that have to agree to terminate it. A buyer can't unilaterally terminate this on their own, but keep in mind, nor can you in the firm. Protection period is the same. Again, it's just put in a different location here. This is an important change here in paragraph 5. So of course, in bold capital letters, it says that commissions are not fixed. It's all negotiable. But here's the key difference that you want to make sure you're aware of this last sentence. Firm may not receive compensation for the services from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to herein with the buyer. This change is from the previous version of the buyer agency agreement that said, if the compensation that the firm is going to be receiving is more than what's listed here, then the buyer needs to acknowledge that and agree to that. This is saying not that the buyer has to agree. This is saying that the firm just flat out cannot receive more than what we put in the agreement here. So if you put 2.5% as the fee you expect to earn in your buyer agency agreement, and a builder or a seller is offering 3%, you cannot take that 3%. Under the terms of this new buyer agency agreement, you can only take up to what is in your buyer agency agreement. So in that case, you could only take 2.5%. Even if the seller or builder sends you a Form 220 that says, hey, we're paying 3%, you're going to say, hey, that's great, but I can only receive 2.5%. Please amend that document to reflect 2.5%. Or here is a Form 220 that reflects 2.5%. So give serious consideration to what you are putting in here, because this is the most you can receive, this specific amount that you are putting in this agreement. Now, if you put, for example, 2.5% in here and the builder or seller or listing firm is only willing to pay 2%, you have the option to just accept that 2% and not make your buyer pay the difference. That's perfectly fine. Choice Residential will not force you to collect that amount from the client. That's a decision you'll make. And you don't have to do any additional paperwork to account for that unless the buyer asks you to, in which case you would want to amend your agency agreement, but you want to amend it in such a way that it only amends it for that property they are purchasing or making an offer on. Because if that transaction doesn't work out for some reason, you want your core, you want the commission that you expect to be paid to revert back to that original amount. So just give that some thought if at any point the compensations don't line up there. But that is key. This is coming from the attorneys in Missouri who originally had filed the original lawsuit that led to all this. They have filed a brief with the court basically saying you just have agents who are they're just amending their agency agreement to receive more money later, more than what they said they were actually charging. That kind of defeats the purpose here. So what we're saying is you need to give real consideration to what your fees are worth, what your services are worth, what fees you charge. Put that in here, and that's what you're going to get paid. By the way, in case that's uncomfortable for you, just remember that's the way it works on the listing side too. Whatever you told the seller your fee was for your services, that's what you get paid. And so we're operating the same way on the buy side now. All right, let me jump into dual agency. Nothing's changed here other than they've made it a little easier to read. What took a page and a half before, they've consolidated into about a half a page. But I want to just walk through how to have your clients initial these blanks. 99.9% of the time, remember at Choice Residential, we do require that all buyers and sellers agree to designated dual agency. There are some rare instances where it would make sense that they are only agreeing to standard dual agency or exclusive or are not agreeing to dual agency at all. But 99.9% of the time, your clients will be agreeing to designated dual agency. And so if you don't have them initial this section correctly, it will get kicked back to you in compliance. In those situations where the client is not agreeing to designated dual agency for some reason, you are required to have a conversation with me, the broker in charge, before executing that paperwork, so that we make sure that you, the agent, and the client have a full understanding of the implications there, because it limits the properties that a buyer can see. And on the listing side, it limits the buyers who can see their property, because no Choice Residential agent can show the property if they are not approving dual agency. So again, most of the time, you're going to have clients initialing the second set of blanks, all right here. So you have this first grouping here where there's two options. They're going to initial the second option there. Then they will also, in this second grouping here, they will also initial the third blank, and so the third set of initials. And so this is saying that the firm may act as a dual agent, and then it's saying that the firm is authorized and directed to act as designated dual agency. So unless for some reason you can't do designated dual agency, for example, if one side knows too much information about the other side. Again, there are situations that could pop up. For instance, let's say you've been working with a buyer for 2 months and then you get a call from somebody to go list their house. And as it turns out, that house that you just listed would be perfect for this buyer that you've been working with for 2 months. So you're going to go to the buyer and say, hey, just so you know, I got this listing I just took. I think it could be perfect for you, but I represent the seller. And you're going to go to the seller and say, hey, I've got this buyer who could be perfect for your house, but I represent them. So if I'm going to bring them over, if I'm going to get you guys together, just know I'm going to be a dual agent. I represent both of you, and I won't be able to advise either one of you against each other. That wouldn't be fair. So I'm just going to act as a referee. And then if that rare situation pops up, then you're going to just simply amend your agency agreement. And I'll help walk you through how to do that, or managing broker or broker in charge. We can all help you navigate how to amend the agency agreement in the proper ways. But 99.9% of the time, when you are establishing agency with a new buyer or a new seller, this is the way you're going to do it. First grouping is going to be the second set of initials. Second grouping is going to be the third set of initials. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to myself or to Ashley, our managing broker, offline so that we can explain that to you. All right, and the rest of the stuff here is mostly the same as what we had before. Again, just continue to consolidate in a way that is easier for everybody to read. So hopefully this explanation lets you know how to fill this exclusive buyer agency agreement form 201 January 2025 revision out. If you do have questions, please reach out to us offline so that we can make sure you're clear.